It was a quiet morning. The kind of morning that looks perfect on the outside, but feels completely empty on the inside. The sun was soft, the air was calm, and the city was slowly waking up. Yet, for Daniel, everything felt the same. The same room, the same walls, the same life that no longer made sense. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, holding a cold cup of coffee he forgot to drink. The clock ticked slowly, almost painfully. Tick, tick, tick. Every sound in that room felt louder than usual, because silence always speaks loudest when your heart feels lost. He looked out the window. People were walking fast. Cars were moving. Everyone seemed to have a purpose. Everyone looked like they knew where they were going. But Daniel didn't. Not anymore. He had a job. A good one, actually. A small apartment. A few friends. A life that most people would say was fine. Yet, inside him, there was this heavy question, a question that had been growing quietly, day by day. Why do I feel like something is missing? He tried to ignore it. He tried to stay busy. But no matter what he did, watching TV, checking his phone, working late, the question never went away. It waited for him every night before sleep and whispered again every morning. Is this all there is? That morning, as he looked at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the person staring back. His face looked tired, not because of lack of sleep, but because of lack of meaning. He smiled, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile you wear so people don't ask what's wrong. He remembered the days when life used to feel exciting, when he was younger, when dreams felt possible, when waking up felt like opening a new page of a story. But somewhere between growing up and paying bills, that fire had gone out. Now, everything felt flat. Gray. Repetitive. Like living the same day again and again, just with different dates on the calendar. He walked to the kitchen, made toast, and turned on the radio. The voice of a cheerful host filled the air. Good morning, everyone. Another beautiful day ahead. Remember, happiness is a choice. Daniel turned it off. He didn't want to hear about happiness. He wanted to feel it. But he didn't even know what that meant anymore. He looked at the clock again. It was time to leave for work. The moment he stepped outside, the world felt too loud, the traffic, the people, the rush. He walked to the bus stop, surrounded by strangers who all looked tired in their own ways. On the bus, he looked at the faces around him, a woman scrolling through her phone, a student reading a book, an old man staring out the window. Everyone was there, yet no one was really there. Each one lost in their own thoughts, their own invisible battles. Daniel whispered to himself, maybe everyone feels this way. Maybe no one really knows what they're doing. But that thought didn't comfort him. It scared him. Because if everyone was lost, then what was the point of trying to find meaning at all? When he reached the office, he put on his work face. Smiled. Said good morning. Typed on his computer. Laughed at small jokes. Pretended to care about things he didn't care about. It was all an act. A routine. A script he had learned too well. Hours passed. Then, during lunch, he sat alone by the window, eating in silence. That's when he noticed a bird, small, brown, sitting on the edge of the glass outside. It looked calm, peaceful, alive. It wasn't doing much, just sitting there, looking at the sky. But something about it made Daniel stop and watch. The bird didn't have a job, didn't have a plan, didn't need to explain its purpose. And yet, it looked completely free. For the first time in weeks, Daniel smiled, not the fake kind, but a small, quiet, real one. It was strange. Simple. But real. And that's when he thought, maybe meaning isn't something we find. Maybe it's something we notice. That small moment stayed with him for the rest of the day. It was the beginning of something he didn't yet understand, a small crack in the wall of routine. He didn't know it yet, but that morning, that empty morning, would change his life forever. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The city was quiet, but his mind was loud. Thoughts kept circling inside his head like restless birds. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, asking himself a question he had never dared to ask before. What am I really living for? He turned on his side, closed his eyes, and tried to push the thought away. But it stayed. It pressed against him like a weight on his chest. He thought about the bird he had seen earlier that day, free, peaceful, simple. And then he thought about himself, trapped, tired, and unsure. He whispered into the darkness, "When did I lose that feeling? That sense of being alive?" The room didn't answer, but the silence felt honest. It was the kind of silence that doesn't lie. In the morning, he looked in the mirror again, but this time, instead of brushing the thought away, he allowed it to stay. He looked at his reflection and asked softly, "Who am I becoming?" It was a simple question, but it hit deep. Because for the first time, he realized how far he had drifted from the person he used to be. Once, he had dreams. He wanted to travel. He wanted to write. He wanted to make something that mattered. But life had quietly covered those dreams with bills, schedules, and responsibilities. One layer at a time, they had disappeared. Now, all that was left was the routine, the bus, the office, the meetings, the polite smiles, and the long, tired evenings. As he walked to work that morning, he looked around, people running, cars honking, shops opening. Everything was moving fast. Too fast. He thought, we live so fast, but feel so little. At the office, a coworker named Leo sat next to him. Leo was cheerful, always making jokes. He seemed happy. But that day, Daniel noticed something new. Behind Leo's laughter, there was something else, a kind of emptiness in his eyes. During lunch, Daniel asked quietly, "Hey Leo, do you ever feel like you're just living the same day again and again?" Leo looked surprised, then laughed. "Of course, man. That's life, right? Same thing every day. That's how it is." Daniel smiled weakly. But inside, something felt wrong. Is that really what life is? Just repeating the same day until we can't anymore? That question followed him the whole week. It didn't leave him alone. He started noticing things he never noticed before. How people avoided eye contact on the bus, how everyone seemed distracted by their phones, how smiles looked tired, not real. He began to wonder if everyone was just pretending to be fine, pretending to be happy, pretending that life made sense. One evening, he sat by his window and watched the sunset. The sky was golden, beautiful. But he noticed something strange. No one else was looking. People were walking by, rushing home, staring at screens. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked up. He whispered, "Why don't we see beauty when it's right in front of us?" He felt a strange sadness, not because of his own life, but because of how easily humans forget what matters. How easily we trade wonder for comfort. That night, Daniel made a small decision to start listening more deeply, not to music or podcasts, but to life itself. To listen to what it was trying to tell him. So he began taking evening walks, without his phone. Just walking. Listening to the sound of his own footsteps, the wind, the city breathing. At first, it felt strange. Then, slowly, peaceful. He started writing small thoughts in a notebook, nothing big, just things he noticed. Like, the sky changes color every minute. Or, the world is quieter when I stop talking. Those small notes felt like seeds, tiny but alive. He didn't know it then, but he was beginning to wake up slowly, softly, to the deeper side of life. One night, while writing, a question came to him so suddenly that he stopped breathing for a moment. What if meaning isn't something we find at the end, but something we create in the middle? He closed his notebook and sat still. That thought lit a small light inside him, a quiet kind of hope. And for the first time in a long time, he went to bed not with fear, but with curiosity. He didn't have answers yet. But now he had questions. Real ones. And questions, real questions, are always the beginning of something meaningful. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the same alarm. The same tone. The same sound. The same start. He lay in bed for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling. He could already feel it, the pull of routine, heavy and invisible, wrapping around him like a quiet chain. He got up, brushed his teeth, got dressed, made coffee, and left for work. The same steps. The same rhythm. Everything around him looked exactly like yesterday, the street, the faces, the gray sky. But inside, something was changing. He could feel it. It was small, fragile, but real, a tiny difference in the way he noticed things. At the bus stop, he looked at people more carefully. The young woman beside him was yawning. The old man nearby was rubbing his eyes. Everyone looked tired. Not just physically, soul-tired. He thought, why do we all move like machines? Where are we all trying to go so fast? When he got to the office, he sat at his desk and stared at his computer screen. The blue light reflected on his face as he began typing numbers, reports, emails, words that meant nothing to him. His fingers moved automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He could feel a question growing louder. If I stopped doing this, would it even matter? He looked around. People were typing, talking, pretending to care. Everyone looked busy. But their eyes looked empty. He whispered quietly to himself, we spend our whole lives working, but what are we working for? That day, during a meeting, his boss was talking about deadlines and sales targets. The words were loud, sharp, serious. But in Daniel's mind, they sounded far away, like echoes in a large, empty room. His heart felt disconnected. He looked at his notebook and began to draw small circles, one inside another until they filled the page. He didn't know why. It just felt like what life was, round and repeating. After work, he didn't go straight home. Instead, he walked. The city lights were glowing. The air was cool. People rushed past him, faces, phones, noise. He walked aimlessly, feeling the rhythm of his own steps. He noticed how every shop looked the same, how every conversation sounded similar, small talk, tired laughter, fake smiles. He thought, everyone's living, but no one's alive. He stopped by a cafe he had never been to before. It was small, quiet, warm. He ordered a cup of tea and sat by the window. An old man sat at the next table, reading a small, worn-out book. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were calm, almost glowing. Daniel watched him for a while. Finally, the old man looked up and smiled. It was a simple smile, but it felt deep, as if he knew something Daniel didn't. Daniel hesitated, then said softly, "You look peaceful." The old man chuckled. "Peaceful? Maybe. I just stopped fighting the wrong battles." Daniel tilted his head. "What do you mean?" The old man closed his book and said, "Most people spend their lives trying to win at things that don't matter. Jobs, opinions, numbers. They forget the things that make them feel alive. And when they finally remember, it's often too late." The words hit Daniel hard. It felt like the old man had just opened a window in his mind. He asked, "So, what makes you feel alive?" The old man smiled again. "Simple things. Talking to people. Reading. Watching the rain. Breathing slowly. Listening to life instead of chasing it." Daniel nodded slowly. The conversation was short, but it left something behind, like a quiet echo that wouldn't fade. When Daniel reached home that night, he didn't turn on the TV. He didn't scroll through his phone. He just sat by the window and looked outside. For the first time, he noticed how beautiful the sound of rain was. Soft, honest, real. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The world felt alive again, not louder, but clearer. But even in that moment of calm, another voice spoke inside him, a small, honest one. You can't stay the same. You need to change something. He didn't know what yet. But he knew one thing, he couldn't go back to living on autopilot. Not after feeling what it's like to wake up. And that night, as he drifted to sleep, he promised himself something quiet but powerful. I'll find what makes life meaningful. Even if it takes time. Even if it scares me. Outside, the rain kept falling. Gentle. Rhythmic. Like the heartbeat of a world still waiting to be understood. It was a Sunday morning, soft sunlight spilling through half-closed curtains, the kind of light that feels gentle, almost shy. Daniel woke up early, not because he had to, but because his mind felt restless. He made himself a cup of tea and sat by the window again. The city was quieter than usual. No rush. No traffic. Just birds and the sound of someone sweeping the street below. He watched for a while and thought, maybe peace doesn't come from silence. Maybe it comes from noticing. That thought made him smile. It was strange how small things had started to speak louder than all the noise he used to chase. Later that day, he decided to go for a walk, not anywhere special, just out. The air felt fresh and the streets were still half asleep. He walked past a park, a bookstore, a small cafe, and then, as he turned the corner, he saw her. An old woman sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. Her hair was white like snow, and her hands were gentle, moving slowly, as if each motion had meaning. She looked peaceful, alive, completely present. Daniel stopped for a moment. Something about her reminded him of the old man in the cafe, but different, softer, warmer. He sat down on the other end of the bench, quietly. She noticed him and smiled. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes, it is." For a few seconds, they just sat there, watching the pigeons move around their feet. Then the woman spoke again, softly. "People rush too much these days. They forget to just sit and watch the world breathe." Daniel smiled. "I used to be one of them." She chuckled. "Used to? I'm trying not to be," he said. She nodded slowly, as if she understood something deeper than the words he said. "Trying is a good start," she said. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you come here every day?" "Almost every morning," she replied. "I like watching the pigeons. They remind me of my husband." Daniel looked at her, curious. "He used to feed them too?" She smiled. "Yes. Every day. We'd sit here together, rain or shine. He used to say, 'These birds don't worry about tomorrow. That's why they're free.'" Daniel's chest tightened. There was something beautiful and sad in her voice. "What happened to him?" he asked gently. She looked at the sky for a moment. "He passed away 2 years ago." Daniel didn't know what to say. He looked down, feeling sorry. "I'm sorry," he said softly. She smiled kindly. "Don't be. He lived a full life. And I still talk to him, you know. Not with words, but with silence." Daniel looked at her with quiet amazement. "That's beautiful," he said. The woman nodded. "We used to think meaning came from big things, success, plans, goals. But when he got sick, everything became simple. We found meaning in small things, in morning tea, in laughter, in just sitting together." She looked at Daniel directly now, her eyes clear and full of warmth. "Do you know what he said before he passed?" Daniel shook his head. She whispered, he said, "Don't waste your time trying to find meaning in the future. It's always hiding in the present." Those words hit Daniel like a wave. He felt something inside him loosen, something he had been holding onto without knowing it. She smiled again, watching the birds fly away. "Life doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful," she said. "It just needs to be felt." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand that." The woman laughed softly. "Good. Because once you see meaning, you can't unsee it. For a long moment, they sat in silence, two strangers, two souls, just watching the pigeons and the sunlight move across the ground. When Daniel finally stood up to leave, he said, "Thank you for sharing that." She smiled. "Don't thank me. Just live it." He walked away, but the woman's words followed him like a soft echo in his mind. Meaning is hiding in the present. As he walked through the park, everything looked different. The trees, the sound of laughter, even the smell of coffee from a nearby cafe. Everything felt alive. He realized he had spent most of his life looking for meaning instead of seeing it. It had always been there, in the sound of rain, in a kind word, in quiet mornings, in human connection. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel lost. He felt awake. That evening, he opened his notebook again and wrote only one line, "I think I've started to listen." He didn't know what would come next, but for once, that didn't scare him. Because now, even silence had a voice. The next morning felt different. The air felt lighter. The colors seemed brighter. It wasn't that the world had changed, it was that he had. For the first time in months, Daniel woke up before his alarm. He didn't rush to check his phone. He didn't drag himself out of bed. He just sat there, still and calm, feeling the soft light touch his face. He whispered to himself, "I'm still here. And that's enough." He smiled. A small one, but real. He made his coffee slowly, listening to the sound of the water boiling, the smell of roasted beans filling the room. He realized that he had never truly noticed these sounds before. They were always background noise. But now they felt alive. He walked to the window and looked out. The street was waking up, a man opening his shop, a child laughing, an old woman walking her dog. Everything looked ordinary. But to Daniel, it was extraordinary. He thought about the old woman in the park and her husband's last words, "Don't waste your time trying to find meaning in the future. It's always hiding in the present." That sentence echoed inside him like music. That day, he decided to do something different. Instead of taking the bus to work, he walked. It took longer, but he didn't care. He watched the sunlight reflect on windows, smelled fresh bread from a bakery, heard a street musician playing a quiet tune. He smiled at strangers, some smiled back, some didn't, but that didn't matter. It was as if he was seeing the world for the first time. At the office, things were the same, the meetings, the emails, the noise. But Daniel wasn't the same. He no longer felt trapped inside it. He observed it, like someone watching a movie he'd already seen. During lunch, he went outside and sat in a nearby park. He didn't take his phone with him. He just watched the sky and the trees. A small child was chasing bubbles nearby, laughing uncontrollably. The sound made Daniel laugh too, not because it was funny, but because it was pure. He realized how much joy we lose when we grow up, how we forget the beauty of simple things. He thought, maybe meaning is not something we achieve. Maybe it's something we remember. That thought stayed with him all afternoon. When he returned home that evening, he opened his notebook again. He wrote slowly, carefully. Meaning is not in the distance. It's in the details. That night, instead of watching TV, he cooked a small dinner, pasta, tomatoes, basil, nothing special, but he made it with care. He ate slowly, enjoying every bite. He thought about how much time he used to waste trying to fill the silence with noise, screens, people, distractions. But now, silence felt comforting. It felt full. He sat by the window again, watching the city lights flicker. And something beautiful happened. For the first time in years, Daniel cried, not from sadness, but from realization. Tears fell softly as he whispered, all this time, meaning was right here. He thought about his life, the years he spent chasing success, approval, and control. He realized that every moment he ignored, Every small kindness, every sunset, every quiet thought had been trying to tell him something. And now, finally, he could hear it. He laughed through his tears. Maybe I wasn't lost, he said. Maybe I was just asleep. From that night, Daniel began to live differently. Not perfectly, just consciously. He started talking to people more, not about work, but about life. He asked real questions. He listened more than he spoke. He helped a coworker who was feeling lonely. He called an old friend he hadn't spoken to in years. He started reading again, books about people, stories about life. And he noticed something strange. The more he gave attention, the more meaning he received. It was like life was a mirror, reflecting back whatever you offered it. Weeks passed, and people at work began to notice. "You seem happier," one said. "You look more peaceful," another commented. Daniel smiled. "Maybe I just stopped fighting what is," he said. He no longer felt like he was waiting for something to happen. He had stopped running after life, and life, finally, had caught up to him. That weekend, he went back to the same park. The old woman was there again, feeding the pigeons. He smiled and waved. "Good morning." She smiled back. "Ah, you're here again." "Yes," he said, sitting down. "I think I understand what you meant." She raised her eyebrows. "About what?" "Meaning," he said. "You were right. It's not in what we do. It's in how we do it, with attention, with love, with presence." She laughed softly. "Then you've already found it." They sat together in silence, watching the pigeons dance in the sunlight. Daniel looked up at the sky, his heart full and light. He whispered, "Thank you." The woman smiled, not asking for what. "Keep noticing," she said. "That's all you need to do." And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel felt whole. It happened slowly, almost quietly, like the way dawn replaces the night, gentle, steady, without noise. Daniel didn't plan to change. He didn't make a list. He didn't announce it to anyone. But little by little, something inside him began to move differently. He started to wake up with a sense of calm instead of pressure. He no longer rushed. He walked slower, spoke softer, and smiled more, not because everything was perfect, but because he had learned to see the beauty in imperfection. At work, his coworkers noticed the difference. He still did his tasks, still attended meetings, still replied to emails, but now there was something new in his presence. He listened. He paid attention. He looked people in the eye when they spoke. One day, during lunch, a young intern named Mia sat beside him. She looked tired, her shoulders slouched, her eyes empty. "You okay?" Daniel asked. She sighed. "I don't know. I just feel tired. Not sleepy tired. Just tired of everything." Daniel looked at her for a moment. He saw himself, the old version of himself, in her eyes. He said softly, "I know that feeling." She looked up. Yes, he said. "It's like you wake up and you don't know why you're doing any of it." Her eyes filled with tears. "Exactly." He smiled gently. "You know, I used to think something was wrong with me for feeling that way. But I've learned that sometimes feeling lost just means you're ready to find something real." She looked at him silently, breathing a little deeper now. He continued, "You don't have to fix your life all at once. Just start noticing small things again. Things that make you feel alive, even if it's just the sound of rain or your favorite song. Meaning grows from those moments." Mia nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel smiled. "Anytime." That small conversation stayed with her and with him. It was the first time Daniel realized that his change was no longer just for himself. It was quietly spreading like light through a window, touching others without trying to. Over the next few weeks, he started to see how his energy affected people. When he smiled, others smiled back. When he listened, others opened up. When he slowed down, others stopped rushing too. It wasn't magic. It was presence. One evening, after work, he went to his favorite cafe, the same one where he once met the old man with the calm eyes. He sat in the same corner with a cup of tea and his notebook. He opened it and began to read the pages he had written, small notes, random thoughts, pieces of realization. Each line felt like a step on a path he didn't know he was walking. He read one that said, "The world changes when you change the way you see it." He smiled. It sounded simple, but it was true. A woman sitting at the next table looked at him and said, "Excuse me, you seem peaceful. What are you reading?" Daniel laughed softly. "Just my own thoughts." She smiled. "You look like someone who figured something out." Daniel paused. "Not figured out," he said. "Just started listening." She nodded slowly, as if she understood exactly what he meant. Later that night, as he walked home, the city looked different again. The lights felt warmer. The noise felt softer. Even the faces of strangers looked familiar somehow, as if everyone was part of the same quiet story. He realized something then, something simple but powerful. When you start living with meaning, the world doesn't change for you. You change with it. You begin to move in rhythm with life, not against it. Days turned into weeks. Seasons began to shift. And with time, Daniel felt lighter. Not because his life was easier, but because he no longer needed it to be. He stopped chasing happiness and started noticing peace. He stopped searching for the right path and began walking with trust. One day, while cleaning his apartment, he found an old photo, him as a teenager, smiling wide, holding a camera. He remembered that dream, to tell stories, to travel, to capture life. And he smiled. The dream wasn't dead. It was just waiting for him to return. So he did something brave, something his old self would never do. He applied for a short creative writing course at a local community center. The first class was small, 6 people, different ages, different backgrounds. The teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves and share why they were there. When it was Daniel's turn, he said slowly, "I'm here to remember how to feel alive." The class went quiet for a moment, then everyone smiled. It was the beginning of something new, not a new life, but a new way of living the same one. After class, Daniel walked home under a soft evening sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds with gold and pink. He thought about how much had changed not outside, but inside. He whispered to himself, this is what meaning feels like. And at that moment, he realized something even deeper. Meaning isn't found in moments of perfection. It's built quietly, through small acts of awareness, kindness, and truth. You don't have to shout to change your life. Sometimes, the biggest transformations are silent. It was a quiet Sunday morning. The sun had just risen, soft and golden, touching the curtains of Daniel's apartment. He was sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the city slowly come alive, cars moving, people walking, a child laughing in the distance. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel lost. He didn't feel empty. He just felt here, present. He took a deep breath and smiled. He remembered all the mornings he had rushed through, all the nights he had stayed awake wondering why life felt so heavy. Now it was different, not because everything was perfect, but because he had learned how to see. He picked up his small notebook again, the one he had carried through this journey. On the first page, the words were shaky, uncertain. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." He smiled softly at it. Then he turned to the last page, where he had written, "Just last night. I don't need to know everything. I just need to be alive while I'm here." That small sentence felt like freedom. He looked out the window again. The light was dancing on the buildings, and in that silence, a thought came to him, gentle but powerful. Maybe life was never meant to be figured out. Maybe it was meant to be felt. He whispered to himself, slowly, as if speaking to his own soul, "Life is not about how much you have. It's about how deeply you live. It's not about how fast you go. It's about how present you are while going. He closed his eyes and listened to the faint hum of the city, to the sound of his own breath. It was all part of the same music now. He thought of Mia, the young intern, and how she had sent him a message last week. "Thank you for that talk. I started writing again. I feel better." He smiled. He thought of the old man from the cafe, whose calm eyes had started it all. He wondered if the man knew how much those few words had changed his life. Maybe he would never know. But maybe that was the beauty of it, that meaning often spreads quietly from one heart to another, like ripples on water. Daniel leaned back in his chair, thinking of everything he had learned. He had learned that sometimes life's meaning hides in the smallest things, in the smell of coffee, in a stranger's smile, in the courage to begin again. He had learned that no one else could give his life meaning. He had to create it, moment by moment, through his choices, his awareness, his kindness. He had learned that peace doesn't come from control, it comes from acceptance. And love, real love, starts when you finally stop running from yourself. He looked at the world outside and said quietly, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to life itself. Because somehow, through confusion, silence, and small steps, life had taught him how to live again. He stood up, stretched, and opened the window. The air felt fresh, cool, new. And as the morning sunlight touched his face, Daniel felt something that words can't fully describe, not excitement, not joy, but something deeper. It was peace. He whispered one last time, "Maybe this is what meaning feels like, just being fully alive in this one, simple, beautiful moment." And then, for the first time in a long time, he smiled, not because he had found all the answers, but because he had learned to love the questions. Headphone closing narration for Mr. English Lab, reflection for English learners. So, my friend, maybe this story isn't just about Daniel. Maybe it's about you. Maybe you've also felt lost sometimes. Maybe you've asked yourself, what's the point of it all? But remember, the meaning of life isn't something you find somewhere far away. It's something you create every day through how you see, how you feel, and how you love. Speak your words slowly. Listen deeply. Be kind to yourself. Because the more you understand your own heart, the easier English and life start to sound. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the most fluent English is not spoken with perfect grammar, but with an open heart.